So why don't we just do, just for the sake of those who are maybe just joining us or we got cut off, I'm not sure at what point. Let's just do a really, quick lightning round introductions of everybody. So I'm Juliana. I will be your moderator today. I'm the managing director of Dream.ai. We're a division of Creative Force. Francello, if you want to.
Hey, how's it going? I'm Michael Francello, Director of Innovation at Shutterstock, a resident subject matter expert on generative AI. Nice to be here.
Hi, I'm Jillian. I'm the Manager of Content Operations for the Creative Studio team at Smartsheet.
Hello everyone, I'm Nikki Badenoch, co-founder of Genie. We are AI talent matching for optimizing workforces. Nice to meet you.
Wonderful. So let's get into it. So I'd love to know from each of you how your organizations are thinking about AI currently. What are you sort of actively using and implementing? Are there any kind of wins or fails that you want to share from the process? So I think, Nikki, you had a lot of good input on this.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, first of all, I started my life actually not working in technology at all. So my years started working as a recruiter, matching talent, matching exceptional creative talent to work. And so I actually came to the world of AI going, okay, how can we codify the alchemy that is matching, getting the right people around problems, and how could AI help us in order to do that really authentically? And so we've been playing around with AI now for like 3 years. And the one thing I'd say is certainly at the beginning when we first embarked on Project Genie, there were a few mistakes and the AI didn't get everything right. And I'm sure as we have this conversation, you need good data to effectively get to a place where AI can actually predict with almost 100% certainty on an answer. So there's lots of wins and fails that you need to be prepared for along that way. I think in terms of generative AI, where it's hugely exciting, and obviously exciting in the context of where it can take the work itself, but also exciting for platforms like ourselves, where we're starting to look at, well, how can it drive even greater efficiency when it comes to getting the right talent around problems, and how can we use that in our products? So we're experimenting all the time with it, and I think it's an incredibly exciting time.
Julie, do you want to share a little bit about what Smartsheet is?
Yeah, so we're exploring it as well. As far as the product goes, Smartsheet is essentially keeping the benefits and security of customers at the nucleus of our efforts. But with that, we're making sure that we're adding value by actually meeting, the user where they're at. So whatever issue or problem that they're coming across, whether that's needing help with formula creation or helping to kind of summarize or analyze the data on a given sheet, meeting them where they are and providing that value for them there. And then as far as employee usage goes for day-to-day tasks, the company sees AI as a big opportunity and does encourage responsible exploration and application. We have an AI guild that meets regularly, reviews different developments going on in the space, as well as use cases taking place within the company. So we are encouraging people to use it and figure out, where we can value add in those ways.
I know Shutterstock's doing a lot here. Do you want to share a little bit about what you guys are exploring?
Yeah. Essentially at Shutterstock, it kind of comes down to protecting our core and respecting our core, protecting it by finding new and interesting ways to be Shutterstock, which is monetizing content as data for model training purposes, offering all of our users an AI image generator that's been available on our platform since late January, as well as developing what we call generative as a service, which is custom generative content at scale through our studios team. The respecting the core comes from us compensating our contributors for the use of their intellectual property, both for the data that goes into training a model, as well as when something is licensed from our platform, as well as giving them the option, giving us consent, choosing to opt out if they don't wish to be part of a generative training set. And I think like the big win is us building out generative as a service, and also kind of a little bit of a fail was not realizing how many clients would come to us asking for bespoke generative content at scale. For example, I use Tool X. They have software licensing terms, not content licensing terms. Can you take all the stuff we've made and recreate it for us with your generator so we can properly license it and get legal protections and indemnification? So that's a good overview of how we're doing it here at Shutterstock.
Yeah, that's great. And so I think I look at this group of people as sort of all of you guys as almost AI power users. And I think for a lot of the audience right now, I think they're very much in the beginnings of the exploration phase. Certainly that's what I'm experiencing when I'm talking to people out in the sort of in the industry, and people just are getting a lot of noise. Their LinkedIn, I'm sure their pages are just there's so many vendors reaching out, and there's so much discussion, there's so many articles. And so I'm wondering if anybody here has some advice in terms of, as someone who's just kind of starting to dip their toes into this space, what should they be considering? How do you sort of discriminate between something that might be an immature tool or a mature tool? How would you advise people in this group to approach exploring this technology? And I'll open it up to anybody that wants to reply, to respond.
I think from a creative perspective, that's who we predominantly work with at Shutterstock. It's kind of a thinking about, it's like everything else, right? Thinking about the goals of your project and understanding what you're trying to accomplish creatively, also as an end result, because a lot of people use our assets for commercial use cases. So it's about understanding that and also being open to the possibility that generative AI might not actually be the best creative solution for you. I've seen a lot of people create problems for this to solve as opposed to use it to solve a problem, right? So I think it's important to remember that, yeah, these things are wonderful. They're, it's a stunning new technology, but it's important to gain a personal perspective, a professional perspective, and also realize this is another toolkit in your arsenal. And in terms of creativity, I don't think AI ever really replaces the complexity and the beauty of human creativity. I just think it's additive, and it's something else that you use. Like people learned how to design on Adobe or use Photoshop or design websites with Flash. It's just something else to lock yourself into the creative flow state. So it's important to experiment, but also be skeptical.
You're on mute, Nikki.
Yeah.
That doesn't help. I'd agree with that as well. I think having an experimental culture, I think it's really important to be at like the vanguard of this, certainly as a brand leader. I think some of the clients that I've spoken to about it do feel a little bit fazed by it. And certainly when you're thinking about like your brand guidelines, you're going, okay, I've got brand guidelines, like now I've got to think about like my model guidelines and how this is then going to be kind of inputted into the machine. So there's a lot to get your head around. I think we'll definitely get to a place where they'll, like already in this space, there's like something like 8 unicorns, like 380 companies already listed as like being in the generative AI space. There's a lot of competition for marketeers to really get their heads around in all of this. And so I think they do need to have an experimental culture, but I think they need to tread with caution as well, and educate them, take the time to educate themselves. And you know what? Like I can see a place where we'll need matching algorithms to be like helping to self-select the AI that will be helping to generate some of this output, because there's a lot of options out there to choose from.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think honestly the best way to kind of get your head around it is not being afraid, like Michael and Nikki are saying, to get out there and explore and to be curious and like kick the tires, poke holes, see what's working for you, but really like having that goal of what it is you're trying to accomplish as you're trying out these tools. And I feel like getting your own firsthand experience, like in combination with testimonials and talking with other people and figuring out how they're solving for use cases, I feel like that's going to be the best way to actually discern like what's bringing you value, is getting out there and just trying it for yourself.
So I was just saying I'm going to answer a bit of my own question here as well, having been on the other end of kind of procuring a lot of AI-based technologies and a lot of sort of more innovative and novel technologies as well. And in my experience is that, you approach it the same way you would approach to implementing any other solution within your workflow. And that's, you need to understand who the key stakeholders are, who are the subject matter experts internally that can assess these solutions. And as you said, Jillian, like what are the problems that we're trying to solve? We're not just going to, implement, some technology because it's pretty and shiny. And, my CEO came back from Shop Talk and had talked to their CEO, right? It needs to be something that actually drives real value within the organization. And so I think it is that sort of internal kitchen cabinet, good old fashioned project management and procurement process, as sort of unsexy as that, that sounds. I think that's kind of the approach. So I'd love to kind of talk a bit about maybe the like misconceptions around AI in creative tasks. I think, Michael, you were talking a little bit about these tools. We want them to enable that flow state. I mean, that's so important to the creative process. So I just starting with you, I don't know if there's, anything around what you're experiencing in getting feedback around what these tools can do and what they can't do.
Yeah, I think it's great for bringing, what's inside your head to life. But I do think there is a designer's, or at least what I've seen and what we do, a designer's sensibility and a discipline, a skill that goes into that. So I don't think it's possible just to see something you like or think something's cool or like, oh, I want to see this. I feel like you kind of have to have that practice to use these tools in a way that creates something truly remarkable, which goes back into the human element of things, right? It's like the ability to have that idea and also put it down into words is so important. And I think that the truly original things I see coming out of generative, especially text to image, text to 3D, text to video generators, are from true creators, not just people who want to mimic something or think like, oh, let's do the Avengers directed by Wes Anderson, which is really fun. But it's like, or I've seen like 30 new Star Wars trailers on LinkedIn that people have created, but people are forgetting a very key point, which is the story, which is the humanity that actually drives the visual and drives connectivity to it. Like people don't gravitate to it. Like the original Star Wars is great, the design and everything, but people gravitated towards it because it was a very simple, Western samurai movie in space type story that had a lot of humanity to it. It wasn't just because of the Wookiees, or it wasn't just because of the creature design, which without the humanity to it, you just have a bunch of stuff that looks cool and you don't have this multi-billion, trillion, gajillion dollar franchise that's really taken over the world. So I think like you really have to think back once again to that original idea. That's where the power of this stuff lies. It's in the brain power up here as opposed to the output that anyone can get.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I'd agree with that again, Franchello, that the creative mind looks at things differently, right? And actually AI looks at patterns and kind of replicates and improves upon that. And so what we talk about a lot at Genie is like human tech, right? Which is basically the two are additive. They come together, and I think where companies need to be smart about this is going, okay, so I've got these AI tools that can help my creative department be more creative, but also using these AI tools to go, okay, well, how can I get the right talent around the problem in the first place? Because I think if you can achieve both, then that's your like unfair advantage right there, right now. And I think the kind of the temptation is to go, oh, there's this amazing kind of new toy that I can play with, but I'm just going to neglect actually optimizing, getting the right people around the problem. And actually there is AI capability to be able to achieve that part of the cycle effectively.
I think that's a brilliant point. And if you think about how, everyone, or not everyone, but most people now, again, that are kind of new to the Gen AI space might be thinking, oh, I'm behind, I need to be doing something, right? Like my competitors are using it. And if a competitor is using it in such a way that it's, like mentioned here, like the talent isn't incorporated, that human creativity, like the unique thing is not added in combination with that Gen AI tool, something that will be produced may not be as compelling, as helpful, as valuable to the end user as what you're doing at your company and not using Gen AI, right? So I think I agree. The human is that differentiator with the competition.
There's a brilliant story that I love about Steve Jobs and how he used to obsess with the unseen. There was a word that he often used, which is a really funny word called impute, and the kind of the Oxford Dictionary meaning of impute is like what goes into the machine basically like affects your ideas coming out. But for him it was about, well, what does this signal to my buyers? And so he used to get the product designers to really think about the art direction of the circuit board, because that would turn them into real artists. And he got the first like 30 product engineers to like engrave their signature onto the inside of the circuit board. And where I'm going with this is that, like, it's what you're saying, right? Which is basically you've got your output and you've got your input, and your input in our case in the creative industries is the talent. That's not going to go away. That's not going to go away anytime soon. And now we've got this amazing tool that can just make us 10 times better, right? And so actually remembering what goes in is super, super important.
Yeah, and to me, and I sort of opened up with this at the beginning of the talk, there's really great, so somebody mentioned at a conference I was at a few weeks ago that, AI sort of raises the floor, but not the ceiling, meaning, the barrier to entry is, to content creation. It just becomes so much easier to create types of content. And so I think that really, it does sort of raise the bar in terms of what people's expectations are going to be for the types of content that are going to be created. I don't know if you guys agree with that or not. So speaking of kind of,
well, I was going to say I kind of agree with it, and I also disagree with it. I think it will be interesting, right? If it's possible to do both, but I think it should do. Where it could end up is mediocrity as well, because there could be a lot of volume produced. So I think CAM will be really interesting next year.
Yeah.
Well, especially when you get these kind of, or at least what we see on our side, like the generators, right? Text, image, text to 3D, whatever it is. When you see, things start to look the same after a while, right? And isn't that kind of boring? Or like you see things that have been trained on like AI generated content, so everything is kind of plateaued and you can identify it very easily. And I think it's like, to go back to, sometimes the C word can be a dirty C word, like content, right? Do you want to create content or do you want to tell stories? What gets people to gravitate towards a film project or an art project, if you think about the most long lasting kind of impactful pieces of advertising or marketing, they're telling a story, right? It's not just content. So it goes that one step beyond. So I think it's, once again, going back to that original point of really understanding that story you wanting to tell and kind of using this as a new tool in your arsenal to get that story across and have people gravitate towards this, I guess, content that we've created now. It's always weird. I always have such a like a back and forth, kind of like a war inside of my own head with how I feel about that being used as the term, right? Because I feel to a certain degree everyone's doing it, but also at the same time, to that point, it kind of devalues it. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, it definitely is interesting. And I sort of wonder too, like, I feel like there's almost like an emerging aesthetic around these tools in some ways. And I think it's like the CGI, surreal, futuristic kind of thing that feels really novel right now. But I think that in maybe, another, probably a year at this point, if not sooner, people are going to be like, yeah, the Wes Anderson thing. We've already seen this, or insert objects, make it fuzzy, kind of concept. And so I think there's a lot of similarities to what people are creating. And then I think once my opinion is that kind of once that noise settles, then we're going to really be seeing some things that are interesting, and seeing it as, again, sort of the tool that similar to, what we were talking about, like the Photoshops and all of that. So there's a question that's come in around AI in project management. And Jillian, I don't know if you can speak to this. Can you talk about, what you guys are doing or what you're seeing around the role of AI in project management?
Yeah, so I think it's impacting the creative teams at that more tactical level. So the ideation, the brainstorming, the output. But again, putting that talent, putting the skills into the inputs to generate those unique, original outputs that stand out. It's impacting the MarTech stack and how those technologies are integrated into the creative workflow process, and then even automating parts of the workflow process itself as well, and how that's all going to be managed at a higher level. So it definitely is impacting project management for our teams, for our creative teams.
And Nikki, I would suspect from your point of view too, a lot of teams are leveraging tools like yours in order to kind of help with their production, but also project management too.
Yeah, I mean, so when we first conceived Genie, its first application was for the fluid talent economy, so for freelance. And this year we're now taking our matching algorithms inside companies so that they can effectively have mobility between their different offices. So the learning that comes from all those different engagements, imagine there's a much bigger data set. You're now looking at like a whole company, not just in one market, but actually the whole workforce all united behind that kind of one cultural vision. And so the opportunity there really is immense for talent to be able to be working on projects that they want to be working on across a whole business. And so, but that's now coming on stream, right? And previously it would be, well, certainly in the UK, it might be like who you went to the pub with would determine who you get to work with. Whereas now you can collaborate and you can have a much wider opportunity set, and that's super exciting, I'd say, especially when you couple that with like all these other features in AI where you can go, right, you can start to like, as you say, raise the bar in terms of the output that you can create.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Francella, are you guys sort of thinking about project management at Shutterstock?
Yeah, I mean, we are integrated into a number of DAMs, into media management tools. Really, where we see AI kind of taking off and helping people is helping organize and also source assets much easier. So looking at like, oh, I want something with this hex color code or with purple or with joy, whatever that is. Like I want to see that exhibited. So taking almost like as opposed to text to image, which is what I've kind of been talking about, taking an image to text use case and helping people label and caption to source those assets. And also looking at, let's say, performance data, social media data, digital. I'm trying to drive clicks. I'm a CPG brand and I'm going to run it on Facebook or I'm going to run it on Instagram. Can you show me assets that have been proven to perform based on that objective, that goal? And maybe the future state is, I want to generate this for this purpose. Could you maybe guide the generation? For instance, an object up here works better. Somebody making direct eye contact is a little too serious for this message. This audience likes this hex code color blue, as we've seen for the last 3 to 6 months of advertising or marketing on this property. So that's kind of where the future I see this going for us anyway.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Yeah, and I think what I'm hearing is that people really love all the novel kind of aspects of AI and the generative AI, but also they're just looking for really practical solutions to their challenges, and a lot of that is sort of these smaller. It's not the big sweeping uses of generative AI. It's kind of more of the smaller, more practical types of solutions. So for the audience here, I know you all have probably built up a ton of expertise in this area, and I'm just curious, in terms of the learning curve, do you have any advice or direction in terms of how people can start to explore some of these solutions and learn more about generative AI, more about AI, good old-fashioned AI in general?
I think my best advice is to don't be afraid to kind of go it on your own and make mistakes. You're not going to break anything. And honestly, like your first go around, especially using something like a text to image or a text to 3D generator, probably isn't going to look good. It's not going to be what you want. But I think it's about that discipline, that repetition, that kind of going through the trial and error process and leaving yourself open to understand that, even though in a lot of cases, especially in terms of creativity, like these are wonderful tools that can make things quicker, but it's not instant. I think it's like getting used to the fact, like, yes, it does all these things right away, but your satisfaction isn't going to be instant. So I think it's about like taking the time to really understand that this is a new skill, this is a new medium. It requires practice like anything else. So I really encourage people to try out as many tools as they can and not to get discouraged if it doesn't do exactly what you want it to do the first time, and tapping into subject matter experts who can maybe open up another door in your mind that was previously closed because you didn't even know it was there because the light wasn't shining on it. So just being open for that experience.
Yeah, I'd agree with that as well. Just a culture of experimentation, just having a go, and also like hunting out people that do know more about it than you as well. Like, we spend a lot of time at Genie with our CTO and the tech team, and I'm always surprised by like what they can do, like the magic. And I mean, it sounds a little bit geeky, but like, being able to take like unstructured data and then being able to structure that data in a certain way, and the speed at which you can do that. Like, I know nothing about tech, to be fair, but like, that sort of stuff, like I'm always wowed by. So yeah, and I think to your point around like skills, I think we're going to start seeing a new breed of skills coming on stream now, and it will take time to work out what those skills are. In addition to like what makes a great copywriter might be what makes a great prompt writer. And so we'll be starting to kind of deconstruct those skills and go, okay, like how does that work, and therefore how can we match against those skills as well.
Yeah, I think those are all amazing points, and I think a good place to start really is just the learning phase. You have to really learn it and understand it before you can like properly use it and like to its best potential, right? So attending workshops, there's all kinds of free courses that you can find with a quick Google search, honestly, even from some universities on AI and the various certifications you can get. There's templates available, connecting with people to figure out like similar use case solves that they're doing, right? Just getting all the information that you can to work from and to use to make your decisions and how you can best to best use it. But even like Nikki mentioned, where you're looking at people on certain teams and you're like, wow, they thought of that, they come up with that. And it's that human, again, that human innovation ideas like, oh, I can do this. Let me try doing it this as well. And it's like you're just kind of building up on the last idea, right? And then taking the other ideas from others and building onto that. And it's just this flywheel effect. So you got to start somewhere. I would just say start with learning. Learn as much as you can and test it out. And like Michael mentioned, don't be afraid. You're not going to break anything.
Yeah, I recommend talking to college students who are in design programs who are starting to use this stuff. Like, I've learned so much from being at South by Southwest or at SIGGRAPH a month ago, where college students, even high school students, coming up and talking about these really kind of like creative, interesting uses of AI. And I think because at the age they are, they've grown up with technology in a different way that I have. So it's like some of these things I don't even think of and they wouldn't even occur to me. So I think it's important to not only talk to the experts, the people who are out there who are making a lot of noise, but it's super important to talk to people who have grown up with technology like this and who are figuring this out as they go, and they're building their own models and they're figuring out all these new incredible solutions that wouldn't even occur to us. I think it's like, it's not just the top tier expert, it's also the person who's just starting, who just has a different perspective. I think that they're a great person to learn from as well.
Are they starting to teach generative AI prompting? Are they starting to incorporate this within their programs?
Yeah, they are. So I know there are courses where they're giving guidance on prompting. There's a lot out there as well. Like to Jillian's point, I mean, there's a ton of info out there, but also at the same time, they're encouraging them like, yeah, instead of using a camera for this project, you need to use a generator. You just need to figure out how to do it. You need to deliver your project using this. It's like telling somebody who's used to painting or used to designing with Illustrator or Photoshop, here's a can of spray paint, you need to go make a mural. I feel like it's a very similar thing. So what I've heard from people I've connected with, especially at NYU, is that they're really encouraging students to do that, to get outside the box and kind of not be afraid of stumbling upon a great discovery. And I think that's I think that in the creative fields especially, I think that's such a wonderful way to look at things and to encourage students to think.
Yeah. And I think it's, to their benefit is programmed to get ahead of it. I mean, the cat's out of the bag at this point in terms of this technology existing. And, I went to photography school a million years ago and worked almost entirely in kind of film and analog processes. And I wish that program had, it had some emphasis in terms of digital and we could dip our toes into it. But, I do wonder about the programs now and how they are thinking and trying to teach towards this, because certainly it's going to be mainstream, whether or not it's using the generative tools or some of the more like Copilot functionalities that we're going to have incorporated into content creation, whether or not that's, writing or Photoshop and all of that. So interesting. So just thinking about some of, maybe just addressing probably some of the more challenging questions that people might have around AI. Is this going to replace roles? How do we think about how workforces and how teams need to shift and change and adapt, or may shift and change and adapt with this new technology? So I don't know if anybody's done some thinking on that topic.
Shall I take that?
Sure.
It's still early days, isn't it? And I think it's totally fair for that to be a concern, because generative AI feels so human. But I think what's interesting, certainly from some of the facts and figures that we're seeing here in the UK. So I saw last week the Future of Work Institute did a survey, and they surveyed 1,000 companies, of which 86% had embedded AI into their work processes, and it created 78% new. They believed it would create 78% of them believed it would create new roles. So I think it's totally fair enough for us to be concerned, and I think we do need to take due caution. I think ethical AI is super, super important, and it's really great to hear that like Shutterstock are, companies like Shutterstock are starting from that place, like beginning from that. I think that's where it needs to be. But I think it's also going to create loads more opportunity, and I think if what's happened this week, I think in the US is really interesting with the writers and the protection that's happening around that, and I think that's kind of what the cultural sentiment is, which is we've got this great thing, but it's serving us as human beings. So let's remember that balance, and I think that will continue. I think because everyone's going into it with that level of kind of mindfulness, I'd say.
I don't think that from a creative perspective, what we like to say is, AI isn't going to replace you, but someone who knows how to use it will. So that's really how I look at this. Of course, there are going to be determined redundancies, but I think that's why I encourage everyone to experiment with these tools and to go out and kind of build up your skill set and show people what you can do with it and show people how you can create truly unique content, art, output by way of your unique perspective. Your perspective is your own. And I feel like that, as I was mentioning before, AI is additive. I feel like from a creative perspective, your uniqueness and your humanity shines through in what you create. And if you don't have that discipline or have that talent, I think it looks like what everyone else is doing. If you do, it really sticks out and you can tell that somebody is onto something. So I think it's just about continuing to educate oneself and learn as much as you can and take advantage of the conversation that is out there and is happening very publicly. I think that's the best way for people to safeguard themselves from one of those situations I mentioned.
Yeah. And Jillian, I don't know if you have any thoughts or...
Yeah, I agree with those points. And I think very importantly, like Gen AI it's going to change human creativity and how we create, right? And how we innovate and how we problem solve. And it's going to be kind of a restructuring of a thought process even, and a restructuring of how we approach or do things. And when you think about how this will impact you just on a micro or individual level, and then you multiply that to a macro level and how that will impact your team or business or society as a whole, it's going to impact how we strategize, how we plan, how we operate, how we structure our business models and teams, how we hire and train, how we upskill. So yeah, human creativity, it's not only going to evolve as this technology evolves, but human creativity will fuel how the technology evolves as well. So yes, it's definitely going to be a shifting landscape. I don't necessarily think it's something to be afraid of. I think that's easy to be afraid of the unknown, but rather embrace it, continue to learn, continue to upskill yourself, right? And like Michael mentioned, your uniqueness is going to shine through in your work.
Yeah, and I think it's sort of short-sighted to think that we're just going to be creating the same types of content for the same channels for the next 100 years, right? And so, the fact that again, and I said this in the opening, that the fact that we have phones in our pockets has enabled TikTok and Instagram and Snapchat and all of these other platforms that just want content. And I mean, I guess that's balancing out with Francella, your comment about content versus storytelling. But I mean, who knows what AI is going to bring in terms of future experiences. And so, so I just sort of think of that in terms of, there will never be the need for, we will always be in desire of more and more content. And I think AI will just be yet another tool that will also kind of enable all of that. So we have about 15 more minutes. If anybody has questions, please pop them into the chat here. So I don't know if you have something to follow up with, Francella.
I was just going to say, in terms of being open, right? Kind of as per what I said before, it's about like, maybe the content is the new way of telling the story. Maybe the story isn't told in the same way, kind of to your point, right? So I think it's even a good reminder for someone like myself who is up here saying something very declarative like that to remind myself that, oh, what is happening is what people are gravitating towards, and that doesn't. It doesn't necessarily devalue it, and it doesn't negate it or anything like that. It's just a day, and maybe it's me opening up my mind to absorb a story in a different way. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's just a label I'm putting on it in my own mind because that's what everyone else calls it. So I think it's important, once again, just to keep an open mind around this stuff and to constantly be willing to be kind of surprised and amazed and educated by somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah. But I do think it's like, if it's just content for content's sake, it's not going to have any value. Right. So if we're just Wes Anderson, everything, it's people are gonna be like, yeah. We've seen this before.
Yeah. I'd love to show you Wes Anderson doing all sorts of things, like washing his car, going to a water park with Martin Scorsese, but that's it has its limits, right?
So we have a question here around what problems have you solved using AI? Any use cases that you can share? I know you all are working for solutions that are generally solving problems using AI. So I don't know if anybody wants to give maybe a specific use case or story around leveraging AI.
I think for us, and some of the stuff we've done is generative as a service. It's just using the generator to create content at scale. So I want, let's say, thousands of backgrounds that I can bring my 3D product SKUs into in my copy, but I want them all to be a little bit different, and I want to go out and market test them. It's much easier to create something like that once you stick the prompt and you start getting a quality output to keep running the prompt and generating, because you're really never going to generate the same thing twice. I think you have to run the same prompt like 1.23 trillion times. So I think it's about when you need something at scale, it's due yesterday, you have a restricted budget. Those have been some of the big wins we've seen. Or, hey, we would love to do this. We always work with you guys and we do photo shoots in Japan and Brazil and Germany, but we need this now. So how do we work with you to do this at scale right now so we can have this by the end of the week? That's where I've seen kind of the strengths of personally with what we're doing with generative at scale.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say what we're doing, the problems that we're helping solve with AI, excuse me, I've got a cough, is what McKinsey call rapid talent allocation and what we call rapid intelligent casting, and that's the difference between the two. Is effectively using AI to get your workforce doing jobs across said geography. Now, allocating doesn't necessarily mean that you're getting it right for talent and getting it right for the project, so to speak. And so that's why we call it casting, because with the power of AI matching algorithms, we can use all the data and all the information to be able to profile the talent in terms of what they want to be doing with their time, and then match that to the project. And so very real problems that Genie solves is effectively helping companies to go, okay, I've got this project for Amazon that needs to be executed this week, and who shall I put on that project? And currently, for a lot of companies, there aren't systems in place to help them do that. They have to go out and pick up the phone. And so that's a very day-to-day use case for what our system's doing. And the reason AI is interesting in that context is it's learning. And it's learning and it's going, okay, so and so actually said no to that, so it's not a good idea, so let's not serve that to them again, etc., etc. And so it has the smarts of some of the human, but the human is still important in that process in terms of how the human's engaging and interacting and selecting. So yeah.
And Jillian,
Yeah, there are a ton of different use cases. I think one that we kind of been experimenting with a little bit recently, just using our product, using Smartsheet, is some of the the translation capabilities that it has within the tool, which we're still kind of playing with. But that could have its own set of use cases. Just data visualization, honestly, is a huge one for us in summarizing large amounts of data and extracting and boiling it down to those key points. So yeah, data analysis is another use case as well.
yeah, that's great. So I know, just as a reminder to the audience here, we generally stay a little bit tool agnostic. There's a lot of questions in the Q&A around like what tools should people use, sort of in that vein. So I guess to the panelist, without naming names other than your own tools, I guess specifically, how can our audience sort of find the right and effective tools to use in terms of leveraging AI? And again, just as a reminder, AI is not an end, it's the means to an end. And so there's all of these tools that exist out there that provide these very real functions. But I don't know if there's if any of the panelists have advice in terms of kind of finding valuable tools.
I would just say to, check out the different companies, look at the roadmaps, get insights into how they're sourcing the data for model training, how they're using the data that you provide to them, and like what risks that may pose. Thinking through actions that you take throughout your day that might be redundant or repetitive. And that's also data-based, whether that's content generation, editing, summarizing, what have you. Figure out what those quick wins are where you can find immediate value, and then start just playing around using and assessing different tools and find where that value is. But like we mentioned earlier, kick the tires, see what's working for you, and if something seems to be falling flat, check again in like a month, because this technology is just evolving at such a rapid pace, right? So, yeah, I would start there.
Yeah, I think to Jillian's point, it's really about understanding, how the machine works, right? Really understanding how the magician does the magic trick, understanding how much of your data is part of that illusion, whether known or unknown. And also, as far as image generators or video generators, text to 3D, anything in the creative field, I think it's important to search out the big names. You can find them, but also try maybe some newer tools, some of the not so big ones, and think about your project. Going back to my point before, think about the goals of your project and see what each of them does for you, right? See what the output is, see how you can compare and contrast, understand how prompts work or negative prompts work or don't work on certain systems, and just see what you can do. And also, if you're using this in a professional capacity for a commercial facing use case, understanding the indemnification, the protection that they give to you as an end user. Are you licensing a software or are you licensing content? How is your data used to train the system? Back to that point, it's just important to keep an open mind, but also ask pointed questions and consider those things when you're going through and you're experimenting.
Yeah.
Yeah, to add to that, I'd say, well, I'm seeing a few of the kind of advertising straight media groups develop, without mentioning any names, but develop quite like smart solutions, which are like company that can help you programmatically generate your content, coupled with company that can help you train and understand how to leverage that across your organization. And so kind of management consultancy type services coupled with like the actual services themselves. And so it's worth seeking out and looking at just some of the kind of blog content that comes from that. It's quite good to kind of educate yourself around as well.
Yeah. And I think to Jillian's point earlier in the conversation too, there's a ton of resources out there. I mean, you can just literally search AI on YouTube and you will find 1 million videos of people demonstrating and doing really kind of incredible things with it. And I'll just plug one website that I've gone to, which is called Prompt Hero, which actually kind of shows you the results from a number of different tools and what the actual prompt was that went into generating specifically images. So it's also a really interesting place to kind of just see what actually goes in and sort of under the hood. So we have surprisingly only 2 minutes left here. And I'd love to just finish with like a question for you guys looking into the future. So let's say 5 years from now, how are you working differently, or how are creative teams working differently than they are today?
I'd say creative teams are seamlessly using all of the mediums that they have been, but generative AI is just kind of second nature. It's another thing like grabbing a pen or going on Photoshop or going on Illustrator. I think me personally, I'm using it to, I don't know, kind of open up doors in my own imagination, maybe working on my own creative projects, because I've been using these tools and working in this has kind of inspired me and remember how much I actually enjoyed art class before I was like, no, you got to grow up and get a job sort of a thing. So, it's giving me the ability to play around and have a little bit more fun with these tools. So I personally see myself using them in some sort of a creative, hopefully creative professional capacity at some point in the future.
Who wants to go next?
I think, as Francello said, I think it will be second nature to a lot of us, and but I think creative excellence will be more of a sought after skill. And our chairman, Sir John Hegarty, I love one of his quotes is "Good is the enemy of great," and I think that's the kind of thing we need to be aware of as we have this tool which can effectively make us all good, but will it make us great? And so I think as we move forward to 5 years' time, I think we're going to have all the tools to get the right talent around the problem, and we'll be leveraging AI to be able to do that. It'll be a question of have you got the right talent around the problem so that you get to great.
And close us out, Julian.
Finish. No, I feel like looking into the future, it feels like you're trying to describe a color that doesn't yet exist, or like a new letter that's going to be added to the alphabet, and like what's it going to sound like? What's it going to look like? How will it impact the English language, right? So just, looking ahead and thinking through all of the different innovations that are going to happen. I mean, 5 years doesn't feel like long from now, but look how far we've come in one. So imagining 5 years from now, yes, those who continue to learn, continue to explore, embrace, and upskill are going to be the ones that are able to set themselves apart. So yeah, I'm excited to see where it all goes.
Well, me too. And we'll reconvene this panel in 5 years and we'll see if we're all right. So with that, I'm going to thank the panelists. Thank you guys so much for this really engaging, really interesting conversation. I really appreciate it. Thank you to the audience for all your really valuable questions. And thank you to everybody who attended the Festival of Creative Operations. I hope it was as valuable for you as it was for me in terms of the content that we experienced today. So you guys can know how to connect with each other, either via LinkedIn or hang out in the lounge for a little bit longer. But thank you guys and have a good evening or afternoon wherever you are.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Take care.
Thank you.
See you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.